Welcome to Perspectives in Adventist Education. I'm your host, Stephen Brawley, Director of Secondary Education and Accreditation at the North American Division. Adventist education started in the late 1800s and has grown to operate programs from early childhood, elementary, secondary, and university levels, becoming the largest Protestant private school system in the world. Our graduates have become prominent thought leaders in all fields. Yet, few outside of the system know who we are and what we do. This series will seek out current voices to share how we are facing educational questions with an Adventist perspective. Let's listen to Charles Tapp, President of the Potomac Conference of Seventh-day Adventists, interview Karen Brown about the importance of reading to your children.
Hi, I'm Charles Tapp, President of the Potomac Conference of Seventh-day Adventists, and I'm here at the NAD Educators Convention in Phoenix, Arizona, where the temperature, believe it or not, has gone all the way up to 112 degrees. But I'm here today with a very special guest, and she has a very hot topic she wants to share with us today. Not as hot as the weather here in Phoenix, but just as hot for those who are listening today and want to get a blessing on really what it means to be an educator and how to impact our children. So can you introduce yourself and share with our audience why you're here and what you want to talk with us about today?
Yes, thank you, Pastor Tapp. My name is Karen Brown, and I teach second grade at Richmond Academy in Richmond, Virginia.
And that's in Potomac Conference, right?
That's in the Potomac Conference. Yay, Potomac Conference as well. We are blessed.
Amen, amen. So you want to talk about the importance of reading to your children. How important is that for parents to do that?
Well, on a scale of 1 to 10, as a second grade teacher, I think it's a 10.
Oh, wow.
But there are some reasons for that. And I think that reading should start very, very young, like even infants, and as we talked prior, perhaps even pre-birth.
Wow.
Because there are so many benefits of reading to your child. Reading to your child helps develop language and listening skills. It also prepares them to understand words and language and how to use them properly. It expands their understanding of the world, their understanding of communities, and it stimulates imagination.
Now, as a teacher, do you see that those students whose parents read to them on a regular basis have an advantage over those who don't?
Yes, and there are a couple of reasons for that. And one is that for young children, for any of us, but especially for young children, modeling is really critical. What is modeled for children is typically something that they will do themselves. And so when children see their parents reading, whether it's reading to themselves, whether it's reading to their children, whether it's reading to siblings, that begins to become kind of a norm. And I can remember having a little boy that I knew of that he would look at back in the newspaper days. he would look at the comics and he would just laugh. He had no idea what they said.
Wow.
But when he saw his dad reading the comics, his dad laughed.
Gotcha.
And so when you look at this particular kind of reading, you laugh. And I'm like, wow, that's pretty fascinating.
So I guess that goes along the lines of saying that values are caught and not really taught.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
I would agree with that because learning to read has its own challenges, and for every child it can look a little bit different. Some children read easily, some children have to work a little harder at it, but as we read to young children, they can learn the love of books. They can learn the love of the pictures with the words. If a parent, if you talk about the cover of the book, like, what do you think this book is going to be about? What do you think we might learn? What do you think we might see? It creates an expectation and like this is a little adventure. And then you open the book and you talk about the pictures and, there are usually few words on a page when you're reading to a very young child. And if you underline them with your finger, or you hold their finger and underline with it, then it kind of gives the whole text to illustration correlation, and they begin to associate words with pictures, and that is a reading strategy.
And a picture's worth 1,000 words, right? That's great. Now, being an educator myself, one of the things that always frustrated me was getting parent involvement. What can you say to our parents to help them to get more involved in reading to their children at home?
Well, I would say that one of the first things you need to do is set a time for it.
Really?
Yes, because, our lives are really crazy busy. And there are parents who are not really readers themselves. So then you sort of have to decide, do I want to develop a reader, or is this not a priority for me? And I would say it is absolutely something that parents should consider as a priority, because what happens even with very, very young children, there have been some studies done with toddlers, that as text is read to them and they're learning new things, like thousands of their brain cells are stimulated to growth.
That's interesting.
And so they have some brain cells that continue the growth that has already begun, and other brain cells that are stimulated with new thoughts. And research shows that that doesn't really go away.
Really?
So once you've established some of that learning, then more reading builds upon that learning. And they just start at, very young, building those brain cells that give them a richer vocabulary, that give them a greater understanding of the world, that help them imagine, like, what might be a different ending to this story? What would make sense? Or you stop partway through the story and there's a problem, like, how do you think they're going to solve it?
So are you saying then that reading helps a child to develop his or her imagination?
Yes. Yes, definitely. Because you're learning new things as you read. You're creating an experience where it's like, perhaps a child lives on a farm. They don't know what it's like to live in the mountains. So you go to the library and get a book about the mountains, and then you see the pictures and the trees and the animals. And it's steep. It's not flat. So if you're going to walk, you're going to be climbing up or going down. And so it creates in them pictures and ideas of, wow, that's an experience I've not had. I wonder what it might be like to live there.
Wow. So in essence, what you're saying is that a child who reads a lot can travel without ever leaving.
They can. They can have so many experiences. And, it's more than traveling. It might be, a story about somebody who's doing a science experiment. Like, is this going to work with this? And what happened? Or it could be a story about how a character is interacting with another character. And, that's where the moral growth can come in, because you can talk about what are some different words that character could have used that would have not created this scenario.
I see. Now, in all your years of teaching, do you see that a parent reading to their child is mutually beneficial?
Yes, because there is research to show that bonding takes place when a child reads with their parent, or when a parent reads with their child, because you're typically, especially with young children, you're sitting close. You might have your arm around them.
Right.
And, they lean into you. And so it's a shared experience. And then, if you're looking at the pictures and you're it's a little bit like going on a reading trip together.
Okay.
Like you go to the store together, or you go to the pool together. You're going into this little story together. And it's like, so you can talk about it later. Like, what happened in that story?
That is great. My children are all adults now, but if they were younger, I would definitely start reading to them again. I think I shared with you earlier that my middle daughter is an educator, and whenever she comes to the home, she always makes her way into my library. And by the time she leaves, at least 3 or 4 books that were there before
Right.
just suddenly just disappeared,
Because she has probably seen her dad love books.
You're right, she does, and she has. So, how does reading to a child support the mission of Adventist education?
Well, I would say that it's just such a great way to help children learn the Bible stories,
Mm-hmm.
to help children learn what is actually in the Bible, what do we believe. And, there is a lot of great literature that has been published by Adventist authors for
Mm-hmm.
children. And it's not just learning the Bible stories, those are springboards to developing moral character. Those are springboards to, like, if you're reading the story of David,
Mm-hmm.
and, he was a young boy and he became a king, how did that happen? What were some things that he was faithful in what he did?
Mm-hmm.
He was brave. He stood up for what he believed even when nobody believed in him. And so it gives you places to help your child learn to instill those characteristics of a Christian. But not only that, we have all those stories of Jesus.
That's correct.
And it helps your children learn to know Jesus. So, be diligent about finding those stories that are going to help your child. The My Bible Friends,
I was just
they
thinking about
are
that.
timeless.
Yes,
I
they
mean,
are.
there are few children's books that are as timeless as that. But I read them to my students in second grade, and they love them. So, find those books and, decide maybe 1 month you're going to focus on trust. Another month you're going to focus on joy or peace. And just kind of like look for books or stories that are like that. There are great children's Bibles that have the stories, but there's like few words with the
Right,
pictures on the
right.
page. Those are great. Those are great to help kids start understanding the Bible, understanding the stories.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a non-Adventist student in my class, and I had one of those Bibles.
Mm-hmm.
He just kept it in his book tub for a long time. And it was thick. It was probably like 2 inches thick. And he would just read some of it every day. And it just warmed my heart
Wow.
because he valued that.
So, do I hear you saying then that if a parent reads to their child, especially an Adventist Christian reading to his or her child, that in a sense, that's like they're giving a Bible study to their child without giving a Bible study to their child?
That's very true.
Oh, now that can be powerful.
That's very true.
Do you know of any stories of any of your children or parents that have really impacted their lives by reading the Bible stories to their children?
Well, I would say that the impact that I see the most is what has happened over time.
Mm.
Because I have students who come into my classroom who are very well versed
Mm-hmm.
in Bible stories and what goes behind them. And then I have students who come in and, they're just kind of like soaking it in because it's the first time they've heard it.
Mm.
And so I think it comes down to what do I want to see that my child will become?
Okay.
And I don't go home with them, so I don't know everything that goes on with those children. But the correlation that you can also see is that, when we have our quiet reading time, we call it rest and recharge, the students who are most self-guided with their reading, and they'll find, what we call perfect fit books. They're books that they can read at that level. They are typically children whose parents have bought books for them,
Right.
have helped them learn about reading prior to coming to school. And, others, then I get to do that.
Right.
I get to help them learn the love of reading.
So as a parent then, if I have small children, I need to be more intentional about what I'm reading to my child.
What you're reading to your child and reading to your child. Because as we said before, setting a time, it can be 10 minutes a day. It could be after lunch. It could be before bedtime. But to set a time that it kind of makes a tradition. And your child looks forward to that. And it's a time that should be unhurried. unrushed. So it's not just something to tick off.
Right.
You make it an adventure out of it, as we had spoken of. And you make it fun and point out connections. So I'm just going to say this once, but I think that we live in a day and age where it's very easy to hand a device to our children. And there's nothing wrong with devices.
Right.
But there is also great value in handing a book to your child.
And reading with that child.
And reading with them. And, play games. There's so many wonderful, wonderful things to do that include devices.
Right.
And perhaps you're traveling and you don't have room for a bunch of books. That's a great time to do, some reading online with your kids and keep that tradition going.
And I love the point you made. It doesn't have to be a long period of time that you read to your child. It just has to be consistent.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that your child looks forward to that.
Yes.
And the parent
yes.
will look forward to that time as well. Now, do you know of any resources that you can share with our parents that can help them to read to their children on a more consistent basis?
Well, if they would like to learn about the value of that, I don't have any specific websites. I know that was, something that I had considered, but there is so much out there. If you just Google reading to young children, there are many, many resources that you're going to find, and you will look for the ones that fit your parameters, fit your age group, fit, kind of the philosophy you're looking for, because there is a lot out there. Now, the Child Mind Institute could be a good place to start.
Okay.
And Reading Rockets is a website that has some great ideas. There are also book lists, and I found these very valuable as a Christian teacher. There's a lot of books, even for young children, that I don't really want to have in my classroom.
Gotcha.
And so there are places where you can go. There's one website where it's 100 books every child should hear before kindergarten. And that's just a general website. So you might, you're going to find great books there, but you might find some books like, right. I don't want to do that. But I have found that if you Google Christian books for second graders,
Right.
or books of good moral character, you can refine it to books that are not quite so hard to read through. Okay. The other thing is just go to the library. I mean, honestly, most books for young children are going to be fine.
Gotcha.
But if you don't want to read about mermaids or something like that, it's often on the cover of the book.
Right.
Just don't check that book out.
Right. I think we need to wrap things up, but before we do, can you share with our parents who are listening, what's the main takeaway that you want them to get from this presentation today?
Be consistent and make it fun.
Wow, I love that. Did you hear that, parents? Be consistent, but make it fun. Thank you so much, Karen. This has been a joy.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me share.
I just want to wrap up by saying, there's a favorite quote of mine from the book Education by Ellen White. She says, higher than the highest human thought can reach is God's idea for his children. God bless you.
That's awesome. Thank you.
This is Stephen Brawley, your host. Thanks for listening. Join us again next time as we explore more perspectives in Adventist education.
An Adventist Learning Community podcast.